worrisome worm videos, inappropriate insect insertions, and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. What if I told you they're all connected in a perverse web of grotesque and rare paraphilia? Creepy crawlies cause most of us to cower. Per contra, for courageous connoisseurs of carnal curiosities, what creates our consternation is what conceives their contentment. I'm SUSU, and today's subject: people who are turned on by bugs. Welcome to the freaky fantasies of Formicophilia. As with all paraphilias, there's a spectrum of extremes. For some, it's about real-life encounters with various bugs for the unpredictable sensations these creatures can provide, be it pleasant or painful. However, for most, the enjoyment is strictly fantasy, and they explore their desires with fictional media, often featuring completely fantastical scenarios that have no possibility of occurring in reality. Now, before I serve you an unlubed fist of actual insect on human action, let's ease you in with the fictional material first. One of the largest public communities for this is r/insects, with 88,000 members. Here, users share drawn, animated, or 3D renderings of interspecies intimacy with strict rules against real-life content. And it's thanks to the intrepid insect enthusiasts on r/insects that I'm able to supply outsiders with a few answers to their greatest questions. Why would anyone beat it to bugs? One self-confessed married man in the community admits that he enjoys imagining himself as the female victim in an encounter with an amorous insect. Another man agrees, and they consider that the community was born from an enjoyment of fictional, non-consensual scenarios, dynamics that involve shame or degradation, as well as the fetishization of pregnancy. Referring to the female characters as victims here stood out to me, as it was a reoccurring theme in many of the answers people gave when explaining why they liked human and bug relations. Multiple users listed humiliation and the subversion of real-life power dynamics as a draw for them. Some claimed the taboo aspect of insects being considered gross and inferior to humans made these fantasies appealing. Others were more fascinated by oviposition, the process of laying or depositing eggs, and found insectoid creatures as the best option to serve that desire. Oviposition is actually in demand enough that some companies sell devices that make laying eggs possible for humans. By the way, in case some of you get any ideas, it's recommended to use food-grade gelatin eggs that melt with enough body heat to prevent egg impaction and embarrassing hospital visits. Be sure to practice responsible egg laying. Another aspect that came up often was fear. Insects are usually considered to be scary by a majority of humans, and for some people, the adrenaline rush of being afraid, combined with the psychological terror of allowing something scary near sensitive areas, makes for a true adventure. Misogyny was also a component that came up on multiple occasions, with some users liking the idea of harming women's bodies or diminishing their worth as human beings. This can be upsetting to hear for most people, but so long as acts never leave fictional scenarios or target non-consenting parties, no one is truly being harmed. Now we've explored a bit of the why, but there's another question on everyone's minds. How do people develop such a niche interest? On r Ask Me Anything, one user who claims to have formicophilia gives the reasoning that a traumatic experience as a child led them to feel uncomfortable with exploring intimacy with another person. Another user on r Confession claims they too had traumatic experiences in childhood and discovered bug play in their teenage years. They now enjoy ant bites in addition to having flies land on them. This user is an example of someone who practices the fetish in real life. In 2022, Nicolas Longpré and Jean-Pierre Gay released their study, The Impact of Childhood Trauma, Personality, and Sexuality on the Development of Paraphilias. This was published in the Journal of Criminal Justice. Their findings state that individuals with extreme paraphilias often report higher rates of childhood abuse or neglect than the general population. Some theories suggest that extreme kinks can emerge as maladaptive coping strategies, basically a way for someone to regain control, desensitize pain, or process trauma through fantasy. These behaviors can sometimes be reenactments of abuse, with the individual reversing the roles or distorting the dynamic into something they feel they have power over. It's also important to emphasize, not everyone with a paraphilia has a history of abuse, and not everyone who experiences abuse develops a paraphilia. Formicophilia is very unique and sees little representation, mainly in part to being considered a type of zoosexuality, which some Reddit users also explain was part of the appeal. They claim Formicophilia is considered an even more advanced form of beast and monster content, pointing out the fact that bugs are the most primal and dominant life forms on Earth. Now that we know a bit about the why and the how, let's examine a few examples of Formicophilia in mainstream media, as well as the kind of specialty content is designed with bug lovers in mind. Most obviously is B-Movie, then there's also District 9 with the insect aliens known as prawns engaging in interspecies prostitution, or prawnstitution. Also in Rick and Morty's episode Autoerotic Assimilation from Season 2, Rick is in a relationship with the hive mind entity named Unity. I guess that could be kind of insexual. As you can see, Western media is rather lackluster when it comes to depictions of hot bugs, but luckily with the power of the internet, we can explore cultures all over the world. Or should I say, all over the Warudo. In Part 7 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Steel Ball Run, Johnny discloses to Gyro Zeppeli that he's really into seeing girls get bitten by mosquitoes. This is quite interesting because earlier in Part 5 during the Yo-Yo Ma is Coming story arc, we see a rather detailed shot of Jolene being attacked by mosquitoes. In a 2018 interview with Uomo magazine, Araki, the writer of the series, reveals he himself has this specific fetish for insect bites, Formicophilia. That's a JoJo reference. You can even find quite a bit of Monster Girl designs inspired by insects in anime, such as Rachnura Arachnura from Monster Musume, Mosquito Girl from One Punch Man, and Kumoko from So I'm a Spider, So What, to name a few. And thanks to the glorious nation of Japan, we also have the Island of the Giant Insects series made by bug lovers for bug lovers. Known in Japanese as Kyochu Retto, the series started as a manga written by Yasutaka Fujimi and illustrated by Red Ice. The manga lasted from 2014 to 2018 and expanded to include a sequel series Dai Kyochu Retto in 2019, as well as a live-action movie adaptation and an official anime. The series classifies itself as ero-gro, short for erotic and grotesque, as well as ecchi, a Japanese phrase translating literally to meaning the letter H. This is used to refer to material that is similar to hentai, but not quite as graphic. The live-action film was released in 2020, complete with practical effects utilizing very detailed giant bug puppets. All iterations of the series, from comic to animation to live-action, feature plenty of terrifying yet titillating encounters with beautiful women and various insects. They had a Kickstarter to fund the English dub of the movie, promising more sex and more gore. They paint quite the picture. Imagine the giant insects buzzing, girls screaming and moaning, and blood and guts splattering all around you. With successful funding of this campaign, it will allow us to release the movie's first ever Blu-ray disc with 5.1 surround sound. They offered rewards such as the lead actress's clothing, meaning everything the women wore from head to toe, yes, that does include what you think, as well as the official giant wasp prop used for the film. Unfortunately, they never got the necessary funding, meaning that the English dub never got an official streaming license, leaving no way to stream it legally. Only a chosen few who pledged to the Kickstarter received copies, which is why the uncensored English dub didn't become lost media. Though, you'll have to sail pirate-infested waters to find that booty. Still, finding content that caters to this highly specialized interest is few and far between, but in the magical realm of hentai, pretty much anything goes.
It's called hentai, and it's art.
From 18-plus games like Parasite in City, Mushi no Kangoku, and Degrees of Nudity, to full-length videos like the Inyo-Chu series and Insect Huntress Saki, insectophiles are well fed by Japan. Recently even, I stumbled upon a psychological horror-themed hentai doujin called Shiragasne, or Layers of White, as some of the panels from the series were being spread through Zitter. Since it was on theme with the research I was doing for this video, I took the time to read it. The doujin spans around 180 plus pages and is about a man being predated upon by a beautiful moth monster girl who ensnares him in a time loop. In addition to the freaky bug aspect and non-consensual nature, this work also explores other taboo themes that are highly frowned upon in most societies. It's fascinating how much media surrounding Formicophilia also includes horror elements and various other socially unacceptable kinks. It's clear that those who enjoy extreme philias know that the general population finds their interests reprehensible or even scary. Perhaps this is what inspires creators of philia-centric media to engage in exploration of other psychologically distressing themes in their works. And speaking of psychologically distressing things, it's time to talk about what you've all been waiting for: real-life bug play. In October of 2019, Vice released a video featuring a few men with this paraphilia who shared their experiences. In the video, an anonymous man describes the act of inserting worms into his urethra. The first step is to submerge his junk in ice water because earthworms prefer cool locations. Then, utilizing the smoke from incense, he encourages the worms to creep into his chilly willy as the heat from the smoke makes the worms seek a cool place to hide. We don't need to get into what happens next. He claims this act is safe because the deeper the worm rides, the warmer the human body is, and thus the worm, repelled by the hot environment, eventually squirms out on its own. And since we're on the topic of insects in perilous places, Brenda Love's 1992 work, Encyclopedia of Unusual Sex Practices, details how some people utilize bee stings for pleasure, also known as Melissophilia, the attraction to bees.
You like jazz?
A man developed his own procedure, which consisted of catching 2 bees in a jar and shaking it to make the bees dizzy to prevent their flying away. They were then grabbed by both wings, and each bee was placed on each side of the glands and encouraged to sting. The result was that the circumference of his one-eyed wiggler increased, and his climax was more intense and lasted longer. For most men, worms in the wiener and bee stings on their bell end are scenarios out of their worst nightmares, but for a rare group of bug bros, it's just another Tuesday night. People tend to find such acts disturbing because, aside from the unusual nature of these practices and the areas of insertion typically being exit-only zones, it involves using living creatures. BDSM educator and Formicophilia practitioner Wintersong Tashlin, in his interview with Vice for their 2019 bug play video, addresses the ethics of consent when it comes to the insects used in kink play. Wintersong's reasoning is that since bugs are not capable of higher cognitive function like that of a dog or other types of animals with actual brains, there is no issue with consent, seeing as the creatures have no true awareness.
I don't worry over much about issues of consent if I'm talking about a maggot, because that maggot has no higher reasoning or thought process really of any kind. I very much don't feel that way about, say, my dog. My dog clearly is capable of making decisions and doing what she does or doesn't want to do. And thus, her consent is important, which is one of a myriad reasons why I would not have sex with my dog, other than not being interested in sex with dogs.
To further explore the ethics behind bug play, let's look into the fact that Formicophilia has some comorbidity with another reviled kink, known as crush fetish. The more ethical crush enjoyers prefer seeing non-living objects getting stepped on like food, toys, cigarettes, and other small items, or sometimes they get spicier and go for bugs. The enjoyment from crushing is usually from the masochist imagining themselves as the object being squished and enjoying the idea of total surrender, while the crusher gets to have fun being in a position of power. Where most people have an ethical dilemma with crushing is when it includes small animals with capacity for higher reasoning, which leads into zoo sadism territory, classifying it as animal cruelty. When identified and found, those who engage in the production of such materials are usually arrested. So then, would crushing bugs also count as a form of zoo sadism? That all depends on how insects are affected by physical harm. In 1984, entomologist C.H. Eisman and colleagues published a key paper titled "Do Insects Feel Pain?" After reviewing insect behavior and neuroscience, they concluded that insects probably don't feel pain and instead reflexively avoid potentially harmful stimuli as a pre-programmed reaction for their survival. Professor of neuroscience at Dalhousie University in Canada, Shelley Adamo, points out that insects lack brain parts like the amygdala, which in humans is linked to emotional pain. She says insect brains don't have the complexity that makes pain feel so intense for us. That makes me feel a lot better about some of the things I've seen while researching. And speaking of research, While exploring this wormhole, I discovered a now empty worm fetish page, and in the misspelled description, I saw an intriguing word: vermophilia. Turns out this is a specific subsect of Formicophilia that refers to the attraction to worms. I was delighted to discover the name for this extreme paraphilia, as worms have inspired some of the internet's most shocking stories and horrific images. Who could forget the urban legend dating all the way back to 1999 about a woman who used mayonnaise as lube and got a maggot infestation from fly eggs that had been laid in the mayo? Or the traumatizing photos from a case in 2014 where an Indian woman received a medical procedure to remove flesh-eating maggots from her lady parts, and everyone thought this was some horrific new STD. In reality, the maggots were caused by medical malpractice after she gave birth, and a doctor left dirty gauze inside her, causing an infection that attracted the flesh-eating hellspawn. Or how about one of the internet's most infamous, disgusting copypastas? My Maggot Story by Blowfly Girl. I actually have a whole video dedicated to Blowfly Girl, her stories, and the insane frequenters of her blog coming up. Link in the description when it's available. It's a tale from the internet that might make you regret having eyeballs. But anyway, once I started conducting more research on vermophilia, I encountered some of the strangest videos I've ever seen. Enter the disturbing worm community on everyone's favorite video platform, right here on YouTube. Channels like these feature hundreds, sometimes even thousands of videos in which various types of worms and larvae are extracted from what I can only describe as these giant, crusty prosthetics stuck to someone's head or other parts of the body. The videos are usually described as dandruff and psoriasis cleaning. Some of these wacky worm adventures have racked up over 1 million views, and I have to wonder just how many are watching not out of morbid curiosity, but for the fetish factor. The videos seem to mostly feature various beetle larvae and everyone's favorite, maggots. I took to the comments to investigate exactly who was watching this stuff, but the comments on all the videos are mysteriously turned off. Guess that's a wormhole for another day. So, to conclude this foray into formicophilia, mental disorders and paraphilias often get dragged through the mud because people are bugged by what they don't understand. This stigma doesn't just sting, it isolates individuals and often prevents them from seeking help or building healthy relationships. But if we swarm these topics with empathy and informed awareness, we can begin to unearth the truth and squish the damaging narratives that keep us cocooned in hate. Let's choose to buzz with curiosity instead of swatting down differences, and let's treat each other with the same care we'd give to a beautiful butterfly.
I'm finished! Finally, I'm a beautiful butterfly!
That's the video. Stick around for more stuff about bugs. I'm SUSU. There's nothing wrong with me.